and Ebert review Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, and Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns. Teresa Russell is haunted by dead husband Mark Harmon in Cold Heaven. And Steve Martin can't get rid of Goldie Hawn in Housesitter.
Meow.
Michael Keaton is back as the Dark Knight, pursuing two very different villains in Batman Returns, one of 5 new summer movies we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert, including Goldie Hawn's latest, plus a look at a featurette by Batman director Tim Burton. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Our first movie is indeed Batman Returns, another excursion into the dark and murky world of Gotham City, where a bizarre band of characters enact their twisted destinies. This sequel once again stars Michael Keaton in the title role, and once again, Batman is more of an enigma than a leading man. Little effort is made to get behind his elaborate facade, although he's back with as many high-tech gadgets as ever.
Take one step closer, Mr. Van Bannon. You missed.
What's new this time are some fresh characters, including a romantic interest of sorts for Batman. Michelle Pfeiffer plays Catwoman.
Who are you? Who's the man behind the bat? Maybe you can help me find the woman behind the cat.
Also new, Danny DeVito as the Penguin, a grotty little man who was abandoned by his parents, raised in the sewers by penguins, and now wants revenge on society.
What do you want? Ah, the direct approach. I admire that in a man with a mask. You don't really think you'll win, do you?
But the real villain this time is Tycoon Max Schreck, played by Christopher Walken, as a power-hungry manipulator who wants to drain Gotham of its energy.
You're a well-respected monster. And I am, to date, not.
Frankly, I feel it's a bum rap. I'm a businessman. Tough, yes. Shrewd, okay. But that does not make me a monster.
Batman Returns was once again directed by Tim Burton, whose credits also include Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands. And Burton is one of the most interesting stylists at work in the movies today. His movies are always terrific to look at. Batman Returns is consistently fascinating as a visual experience. But it's sort of hard to care about this movie. The storyline is confusing, the characters are only sketchily developed, and it's impossible to get involved in the fantastical story. I always felt I was watching from the outside. There are some strange contradictions here. Batman is not a successful movie, but it is, visually at least, an inspired one.
Well, you know, Roger, I think that there are elements to get involved in the story. I did, and I enjoyed the picture. And the two parts that I enjoyed were the Penguin and the Catwoman characters. I think Michelle Pfeiffer is a good comedian and doing good light comedy. And we see her as the office worker who's going to be turned in after she's abused into Catwoman. And then Danny DeVito, I thought, was actually pretty threatening and sad as this little baby, this ill-formed baby who's abandoned. And I thought, this is what Tim Burton does. He gives us characters, including Batman himself, who all have this private pain that they then work out publicly.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is with Catwoman and with the Penguin is that they emerge, they are developed as characters, we get the backstory, and then they don't go anywhere. There is no engine pulling this train. There is no story to really get us from the beginning of this movie to the end, and instead what you have are set pieces, set design, character design, costume design, even personality design, but no narrative.
The problem in the picture, it's not a perfect picture. The problem is the Max Schreck character. Frankly, he isn't particularly interesting. In his story and what he wants to do and how these other two characters fit in, I agree with you, that isn't worked out. But the point is that in seeing this story, I just saw this as a personal story rather than an action story.
But the thing is, maybe if the Penguin had wanted to do what it is that the Shrek character wants to do, give him some kind of an agenda.
I agree with you.
Because the problem is you have the two most interesting characters basically standing around as participants in somebody else's story.
There's no need for Max Schreck, Christopher Walken, in this picture at all.
And yet I would say, once again, Burton makes great-looking pictures.
Okay. Our next movie and our next film is called Cold Heaven, a psychological thriller starring Teresa Russell. As a married woman who has grown tired of her husband, Mark Harmon, she has an extramarital affair, and she's thinking of telling Harmon she's leaving him as they vacation in Mexico.
What?
I was just thinking about you and me playing tennis. We used to laugh a lot.
Before they can have that heart-to-heart talk, Harmon is apparently killed in a boating accident, obviously leaving Russell with mixed feelings. But then suspicious things start to happen involving his corpse.
Senora, I must tell you that your husband's body has disappeared.
What?
And the story gets more complicated when you-know-who actually shows up as Russell prepares to meet her lover in a motel room.
Alex!
Shut the door.
Alex, wait, Gary.
I don't want anyone touching me.
What happened? Okay.
Sit down.
Tell me what happened.
Please sit down.
Cold Heaven offers fantasy, dreamlike sequences which are supposed to make us wonder whether much of the story is just a dream in Russell's head. That stuff is a little corny, although the film does make a good case that every marital relationship is going to have stresses and strains, and that it's a grand indulgence to believe that an affair can solve all your problems. But a mixed thumbs-down review from me on Cold Heaven because of the needlessly convoluted plot.
I always am amazed when you look at a thriller like this and come up with the fact that it offers interesting insights into the stresses and strains of a marital relationship. That's not what this movie is about at all. This is...
It was for me.
Well, I guess it was for you.
Yeah.
All it really is a machine to create mystery and suspense and romance and sexual feelings and terror, and it works on that level very, very well. It's not really a movie, Gene, about marital stresses and strains. It's a movie about its plot. The very part you don't like is the reason this movie was made, in order to fool us and to toy with us in terms of what's really going on, whose motives are really genuine, and who's really alive or dead.
In other words, are you really saying that you don't think I understand how thrillers work? Because to hold on to that thought, Roger, you'd have to say, Gene has never liked a thriller before. What happened when I liked those other thrillers? What I'm telling you is that the best thrillers not only work as thrillers, but they can be even better if they have some intellectual content.
I'm not saying you don't understand how thrillers work. What I'm saying is that in this case, you didn't seem to realize you were looking at a thriller. You analyzed it if it's a marriage picture or something.
No, I said it didn't work as a thriller. I said the one component that did work in it is that Nicholas Roeg and Teresa Russell, the director and a star who happen to be married, are working on a story involving marital life. Why reject that? Why not be open to that? I haven't accused you of not being open to that.
You just did accuse me of not being open to that, but I think we're kind of off the point here. The fact is that as a thriller, I thought it worked and you thought it didn't work.
That is absolutely correct.
Good. I'm glad I got it right. When we come back, Steve Martin and Goldie Hawn tell one lie after another in Housesitter.
You told him you were my wife? You charged the groceries to me?
Well, I was hungry. Now, come on, you got to understand that.
Well, what'd you tell him? How'd you get him to do it?
Well, I guess he was under the impression that I was...
Insane?
That's a scene from Housesitter, a movie where Steve Martin is horrified to discover that a woman he hardly knows has moved into his new country home and is passing herself off as his wife. Now, that's nothing new for the character played by Goldie Hawn, who is a congenital liar. But what's intriguing to the Martin character is how quickly he identifies with the lies once he's entered into a pact with Hawn to pretend that they are married. His strategy is he thinks that will help him to win back the woman he really wants to marry, played by Dana Delaney. Goldie is happy to help him out.
So, then he wants to marry me, and he hasn't even seen my face. So what he proposes is, which is, of course, what we did was we got married the next week at the hospital. And when the chaplain said, "You may now kiss the bride," instead of lifting the veil, the doctor unwrapped the gauze.
Meanwhile, Martin's parents fall for the whole charade and begin to like the woman they think is their new daughter-in-law.
Sweetheart.
Yes, honey bun.
Don't you think a reception is a really horrible idea?
No.
I mean, our marriage is in a very ambiguous state right now.
Which is why your mother feels, and I for one agree, that it might be just what the doctor ordered. So you give it a fresh start.
And I, for one, think you're right, Mr. Davis.
And another thing, unless this makes you really uncomfortable, I'd like for you to call me Dad.
The broad outlines of Housesitter are pretty familiar. This is the same old story about the man and woman who think they hate each other until they discover that, what do you know, they really love each other. But there's an interesting twist here because they fall in love while they're lying, and their falsehoods build and build into a crazy house of cards, and they have to invent even more outrageous lies to keep it from falling down. The dialogue is the best thing in this movie, and the performances, not only by the stars, but also by a funny assortment of character actors. I liked it.
Now, this is a comedy, right, Raj? The last one was
That's right. No, it's really about marital difficulties, the stresses and strains on a marriage.
This picture didn't make me laugh, so I think I figured out how to comment on this one safely in your presence. The problem here is that I didn't believe, as I looked at Steve Martin and Goldie Hawn, and certainly Steve Martin is as good a comic actor as exists, I didn't believe that they really liked each other at all. In other words, when the thing makes its predictable, and I think you're absolutely right, very predictable turn, I didn't buy it. And the other thing is that I thought that the rhythm was pretty much the same throughout the picture, which is that she's going to be forced to tell more and more outrageous lies.
And so is he. And the little shift in their voices when they go from what's real to what isn't real, that little look they get in their eyes is terrific.
I just think I got into this whole rhythm where I knew where they were going with the story, as you did, and I knew exactly how she was going to take me there.
You couldn't have possibly known where they were going to go with their dialogue, though, with those wild flights of fancy, how they met in the hospital, how he fell in love with her without being able to see her.
I just, you know what,
all of that stuff.
No, they just came across to me as written lines. I felt that there was a writer there saying, okay, now we'll make them even more outrageous
lies. There's a writer there. I mean, you know, there are such things as screenplay.
The rhythm, Roger, is what's
the rhythm is what was so wonderful about this film, the way it built and made me laugh and made me smile, and the people around me all laughed and smiled too.
You only gave it a 3-star review?
That's how many stars I gave it, yes, because I've laughed louder and longer.
Okay, good.
Okay, fine. Coming up next, the latest film from the Oscar-winning director of The Silence of the Lambs, a more personal story about his actual cousin, Bobby.
Was that considered pretty controversial at the time, a religious leader like yourself being involved with the Black Panthers?
Well, I think, yes, it was. I know I always used to live in some fear that the local paper would say something nice of me, and I would lose my credibility in the community. And the more the police disliked me, the more my credibility grew in the community.
Right.
That's Silence of the Lambs director Jonathan Demme with his cousin Bobby there. And what do you do while you're directing the Oscar-winning Best Picture of the Year and your most commercial project ever? Well, if you are Silence of the Lambs director Jonathan Demme, you take all that power and leverage and turn it into a documentary about your own cousin, a public-spirited, rattle-the-establishment minister to the poor and oppressed in Harlem. The documentary is called Cousin Bobby, and Demme follows his cousin, the Episcopal Reverend Robert Castle, as he tours a burnt-out slum building in his parish.
Watch your step coming up the stairs. Here's some of the debris, you know, that's been here for so long. And a lot of it is inside the building as well.
Take a look at that.
Yeah, the fire started up a little higher. Another floor. Thank you.
How are you?
This is my apartment.
Oh, my goodness. You all right, huh?
Yeah.
God bless you.
Where does Cousin Bobby's crusading spirit originate? Part of it dates back to his involvement with one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party in his hometown of Jersey City, New Jersey.
He had that kind of tenaciousness. When you start talking about justice and fighting for justice and fighting for freedom, you know, that you hear some of the leaders of our own society talk about, they never identify it with the oppression and the suppression of African American and Latino people.
Cousin Bobby is a modest film, but what makes it more than a vanity project is that we know that much of what the Reverend says is not just opinion, but truth, and that it's going to take a massive effort of personal involvement, his kind of involvement, not just money, to bring the separate and unequal classes of American society together in peace. I liked getting this unintended biographical sermon while I was sitting in a movie theater.
I like the movie, too, and I like Cousin Bobby a lot, and I like this portrait of a man who has actually put his life on the front line and trying to change things. If I have a criticism of the movie, it may be cued around that word cousin, because this is a family movie, and Jonathan Demme and his cousin go back and they look at photographs and they remember their childhoods and when they knew each other and aunts and uncles and so forth. And perhaps because it's all in the family, there were some obvious questions that Demi doesn't ask his cousin Bobby.
Like?
Stories, for example, about why he left that earlier Episcopalian church and why he was unemployed for a while as a minister. I think there were, I think it's maybe because he was too radical at the time and no congregation wanted him. There could have been some things like that. There's a reference to a crisis earlier in his life, and these questions are kind of hinted at without ever really being confronted.
Well, I mean, I guess the question is what's the most interesting part of this guy's life? And I think the most interesting part is where he's laying it on the line right now. In some of his speeches, he has one fire and brimstone speech in the streets of Harlem where they want to basically have a pothole filled that's been open for years. And he attacks the people downtown and says they don't care. And then we see the people on the street saying, we're going to have to take care of our own children. These people are speaking the truth, unfortunately, and that has a real power to it. And then we do get a shot, an overhead shot of the street, and the pothole is filled, and that's what it takes to get things done. That's the richness of the movie.
Okay, when we come back, The Hairdresser's Husband, the story of one man's blissful erotic obsession. Our next movie is named The Hairdresser's Husband, and this is one of the most quietly fascinating and provocative movies I've ever seen about erotic obsession and about madness. This movie is sexier than a dozen Basic Instincts. The film stars Jean Rochefort as a man who had a powerful sensual experience when he was a young boy, and it has dominated his entire life. Here's a memory of that experience when he went to his local barber shop and got a haircut from the woman who became the object of his first teenage crush. As an adult, he finds the woman of his dreams cutting hair in another shop, and he proposes marriage the first time he sees her. She does not respond, but on a second visit to her shop, he gets his answer.
Je ne sais pas ce que vous appelez l'autre jour. Vous avez sans doute voulu vous moquer de moi, mais si telle n'était pas votre intention, la moquerie, alors je suis sensible à votre proposition. Et si elle tient toujours, oui.
That's Anna Galliena as the hairdresser. They marry, and she keeps on cutting hair, and he hangs around the shop all day, as happy as when he was a little boy. The Hairdresser's Husband is about a man who tries to create perfect happiness for himself inside that little shop with the woman of his dreams in the circumstances of his dreams. What we eventually realize is that happiness cannot last forever. We realize it, but does he? The movie was directed by Patrice Leconte, who also made the great 1990 French film, Monsieur Hire, about another man's lonely erotic obsession. This is one of the best films of the year.
Well, I enjoyed it a great deal, too, and I think that psychoanalysts will have a field day understanding why you might prefer, or myself, might prefer a film about a childhood sexual obsession as opposed to a fighting of the wills of adults in Basic Instinct, but we'll let them chew over that. What is good about the picture is that I think that it is more than just a childhood obsession, because you did hint at the phrase of this guy carries it a little too far. The people carry it too far, and yet at the same time, that's undercut with sadness, because just like Marlon Brando and Maria Schneider alone in that room in Last Tango in Paris, isn't that kind of reverie, sexual reverie with just a person alone together, isn't that the kind of thing that people want, and don't they desire it and say, why can't this happen forever? And then we the movie cuts it back the other way. It's very sophisticated, very well done, more than just adolescent fantasies.
The scene, for example, where she's shampooing that customer's hair, and the husband comes over to her while the customer has soap in his eyes and can't see what's happening, that to me, even though you didn't see any nudity or any explicit skin at all, so to speak, nevertheless, the idea of what's happening is very sexy.
Absolutely. Coming up next, our video pick of the week. Boy, we're like two little boys here. A small film that Batman director Tim Burton made before he made his first feature. It's called Frankenweenie. Before Batman director Tim Burton began making feature films, before Edward Scissorhands and Beetlejuice and Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Burton made a short film called Frankenweenie, which is now out on tape due to his popularity. It's a 28-minute Frankenstein parody about a little boy whose dog is hit by a car. The kid stitches his pooch together, and using a lesson learned in science class, he shoots some electricity into the canine and revives him.
Sparky.
If you're a fan of Tim Burton's films, I think you will definitely want to rent Frankenweenie. Now let's recap the movies we reviewed on this show. A split vote on Batman Returns. Roger liked the look of the picture better than the story. I enjoyed the tortured characters of the Penguin and Catwoman. Another split vote on Cold Heaven, the psychological thriller with Teresa Russell. Roger was intrigued by the mystery. I thought it was gimmicky. Yet another split vote on Housesitter, the Steve Martin, Goldie Hawn comedy. Roger laughed a lot. I found that all the jokes had the same rhythm. 2 thumbs up for Jonathan Demme's Cousin Bobby. We both liked the portrait of an activist reverend. And finally, 2 thumbs up for The Hairdresser's Husband, a bittersweet French sexual reverie, and that's the real discovery on the show, although I think that you're not giving Batman Returns enough credit.
And that's it for this week. Next week, we'll be back with reviews of more new movies, including Unlawful Entry, starring Kurt Russell, Ray Liotta, and Madeline Stowe, and also Gina Davis, Tom Hanks, and Madonna in A League of Their Own. And that's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
Introducing new Jovan White Musk for Men. All the power, but not overpowering. Subtle, easygoing, unmistakably male. Kraft Touch of Butter spread. It's made with rich, creamy butter. So when Kraft Touch of Butter says buttery taste, believe it. A touch of real butter makes a real difference. Sundance, made with pure fruit juice and sparkling water. No sugar added. And that makes Sundance a natural refreshment for the whole family. Nakano Seasoned Rice Vinegar, a ready-to-use dressing. No oil, cholesterol, or fat. A healthy dressing for the 90s from Nakano.